I am so excited to see you all and to welcome you and to spend this hour together. As Christy mentioned, NBA is a very important function of our denomination, and it is to us as older adult ministries because we are a volunteer group who work together to see what we can learn and what we can develop and create for older adults and congregations. And in this work, we are seeking to learn and to listen from older adults and from churches. So our group is about a dozen people. We meet on a monthly basis for a highly exciting but also informative dialogue and discussion. And for that 1 hour, we create quite a lot for ourselves to do during the month in between. So today in this webinar, as you have chosen to join us, we see that there is a call for ideas about models in ministry with congregations. And so today we're going to share some of that with you. My colleagues from our working group, Abby and Lois, will be speaking and introducing themselves to you in a few moments. I am a gerontologist, and as Christy mentioned, coordinate our working group. There are some things that we've learned about older adults that we feel is important and apropos to share with you today. One of those is some information and statistics that are found about our national American older adults. On a secular level, we know that there is an ongoing and growing pandemic, using that word deliberately, of loneliness among older adults. This has existed long before the pandemic of COVID, but it has now become exacerbated by it. We also know that to eradicate loneliness or to find ways to overcome loneliness is one person by one person by one person. And in that case, we have learned that maybe our first step as churches or as individuals even is to consider loneliness and its factor. Because we also know, alongside of loneliness, that older adults, like all of us in every situation, need to feel that they are valued and that there is something that they can contribute. But what you may not realize is an amazing information that science has shown us, that when a person feels valued and needed in what they are offering to individuals or to society in general, their lifespan extends. And it doesn't just add a few months to a person's life, that adds 7 years to a person's life. If we think of this along with what we as church can do, we are not only saving lives, but extending lives. And to me, that's so inspiring. Another aspect that we know has to do with churches. In our nation, all of the mainline churches are finding decline. We know this. But what we may not realize is that all of the mainline denominations, including our own, are losing older adults, people over the age of 65, in great numbers. The reason people are offering that they are leaving is because they do not find their needs met in their own congregation. And this statistic is from before the pandemic. So again, we have some new challenges on this side of the COVID pandemic. In our own congregation, in our own denomination, we have conducted a survey, a nationwide survey of our denomination. We received over 350 responses to the surveys. What we were told by people in those surveys as older adults and as congregations wishing to address older adult ministries was some of the first choices or greatest wishes for needs that could be met were meditation and prayer practices. These were suggested by people over and over again, and they were mentioned not necessarily only in the context of a group. The group was important, but also individual practices was important. So as an older adult ministries working group, we've created a number of resources to provide for individuals and for groups to have some Bible study, conversation, discussion, and prayer time. And one of the examples of this is one that I'm going to share with you shortly as a brief meditation and prayer together. But before I do that, I want to remind you that Abby and Lois have some detailed stories to share with you about their models of ministry. Once they have completed sharing their stories, we will continue to offer other ideas of models, just briefly, popping off the titles of those or giving you a brief idea of what those might be, and then invite you, as time allows, to share and question us about some of the models. Our hope is that you'll find lots of ideas in this hour, and you'll need to listen carefully because much of what we're sharing is what you might replicate. Much of what I have just shared with you is something you could replicate. But if you have time to take notes, that's great. We will have the transcript and the recording, but we are also promising to send you tomorrow an email, and that will include a resource list apropos to the topic, and also much of which we share today will be included there. And if you have requests for more, we're happy to offer that as well. So if you will join me in this example of meditation from a meditation booklet on our resource list that you'll see called Looking for God Over Your Shoulder. This particular meditation was written by Paul Koch. So here it is. He says that the average person walks 75,000 miles in a lifetime. That averages to be 3 times all the way around the circumference of our planet. We also know if a person were to live to be 80 years old and averaged walking about 7,500 steps a day, quickly the math would tell you that's over 216 million steps. Now, many times if we're walking, we might be going straight forward in a straight line. But if we also think about how twists and turns and arcs and whirls could cause us to walk in less of a straight line, we still are taking equal number steps. In the sense of the labyrinth, which you may picture in your mind right now, 1.5 miles could be walked around an average size labyrinth, and yet there is nothing straight lined about it. When we think of labyrinths, and I encourage you to recall a time you've walked one or look for one somewhere in your area, another suggestion for a model you might like to follow. Look at your finger now, your fingertip, the side that has the fingerprint on it. And later on, maybe you'll take a magnifying glass or a magnifying reader and look at the lines and the swirls and the arcs and the whirls that are in your fingerprint. And then take a piece of paper and try to replicate those lines as large as you can on that piece of paper. Later today, in a quiet moment, see if you can create one finger's fingerprint on a piece of paper. And then Paul suggests, take that paper and follow it with your finger slowly over each of those lines of your fingerprint. And as you follow that, think about all the ways that you have left an imprint on someone in your life, at church or at work or school or home. And how is it that you have been called in your own unique and special way to leave an imprint on our society and our world? So, with those questions and those thoughts, I would offer this prayer. Would you pray with me? Oh God, you have created each of us in your image, and each of us is unique. We are each called to be and to become who we are best in contributing to others. Bless us in our endeavor to live out our call in creation. Amen. So, as we go forward now today with some other model ideas, I'd invite you to listen first to Abby and then to Lois. So, welcome, Abby.
Hello, everyone. My name's Abby Coles Johnson. It is a joy to participate in this. It's my first ever webinar presentation. So I'm really thankful to Jan for giving me the opportunity to participate in the older adult ministry work group and to share my story about the Good News Crew. A little about my background. I am a physical therapist and certified health coach by training, and I've mostly worked with older adults in my 18-year clinical career. I'm also a lifelong churchgoer and believe and have relied on the community of church as a safe place. My primary work as a PT included creating care plans for my clients, and I often found myself asking people, what are your goals? What do you like to do for fun? And do you want to recover physically so you can do what? I often found people had few outlets for engagement outside of the home, and I would see how demotivating that was for them to challenge themselves physically. I've been thinking about this for years, but it wasn't until I took some time off of clinical work to be home with my kids that I had some time to work on some new solutions. I've been a member of my church, Community Christian Church in Kansas City, since December of 2021. And soon after I joined there, I had a conversation with our associate pastor about my desire to create a group to address the needs of older adults in our congregation. It was a timely conversation since we were in the midst of COVID and dealing with the isolation and uncertainty of that. So we put our heads together and we started the Good News Crew in June of 2022. I prayed over what to name the group, and we very intentionally decided on the Good News Crew. It was my hope to have participants share stories of ways that God is leading or has led them to serve and to share news of what God has done or is doing in their lives. The name speaks to generativity, purpose, and positivity, and the sharing helps us get to know each other more personally. The goals of the group are first to provide a nutritious cost-subsidized meal every month with leftovers available to take home, and we provide to-go boxes. The second is to encourage return to church after COVID by providing a time for older adults to gather for worship and socializing that may be more accessible than a Sunday morning worship service. Third, to provide an uplifting environment with music, sometimes a craft or activity, and monthly birthday celebrations. Fourth, to share our gifts, stories, and how the church has engaged and is currently serving Christ in the community, which we also call our Good News Talk. And fifth, to provide monthly calls to our more at-risk members. We call and check in to see how they're doing. We gather their RSVPs, and we also check in with them about any prayer requests they have and ask permission if it's okay to share those prayer requests when we get together for our next meeting. So the Good News Crew, Yeah, thank you. The Good News Crew was initially funded by our Justice and Mercy team. We applied for and received our first mission and ministry grant from the NBA in the fall of 2022. And then we applied and received a second grant in the spring of 2024 for an increased amount to cover a stipend for my time as the program coordinator and to expand our services in three ways. First, we're working on some intergenerational programming. I've been doing visits with some of our caregivers to see if they would be interested in a caregiver group, and we're still working on that. Second, we have set a goal as a leadership team to increase the congregational participation in justice and mercy projects. So we make activities available during our Good News Crew time for people to engage in those type of projects. For example, we've written postcards for grandparents for gun safety, and we created a chain with quotes on what true community means to me and displayed it at our booth at Pride Fest in June. This is a photo of me and my friend Mars. She attends Good News Crew as a historical member of community. She's not able to access our services now. It's too hard for her to get a ride, so she goes to a different church. But this has been an opportunity for her to continue to engage and see people that she has known for a long time. She used to be really involved in the arts, things at church. And also her son, Patrick, is an AIDS activist. So making this chain was precious to her and a wonderful gift for all of us to have her participation. Third, our funding has paid for me to receive training and a health ministry certificate through Wesley Theological Seminary. And I'm hopeful that this training will support the growth of the ministry and provide connections and ideas that we can use for further outreach in the adult ministry work group. So the structure of our time together, we meet monthly in the church building at community from 11 to 1. We have a volunteer musician from the church that I recruit. They play music for us in the background as we gather, and they usually play from the time folks arrive until 11:40. If I'm not able to find a volunteer musician, I create a music playlist on my phone and just play it through a speaker. This month, we had our volunteers ask people when they called what people's favorite hymns are. And so I put together a playlist of favorite hymns and we played that in the background while we talked. And it was nice. I heard people singing along to their favorite hymns. So it was nice. The time to visit at the beginning is nice because people can just arrive leisurely and not feel they're going to interrupt the program. And if there's a craft or a justice project to do, we'll have the materials set out on the tables for people to work on while they're visiting. During the conversation time, guests come over to my table, are greeted, they pay $10 for the meal and get a name tag. And this helps members who may struggle to recall names feel more comfortable in conversation. We are able to subsidize the price of the meals with our grant, and we typically budget around $17 a meal to cover the cost for volunteers and guests that are not able to pay. We have the table set up with refreshments so they can enjoy refreshments while they visit. Um, Around 11:40, I offer a prayer of gathering and an opening reflection. Then we have the 5 to 10 minute good news talk, usually from a member of the group, but we do also invite outside speakers about something that they're doing or they're involved in and how it has been good news to them. In the past 6 months, we've had church members share about the various justice and mercy activities of our church congregation. Sometimes people volunteer and sometimes I have to invite them to speak, but I usually don't have much trouble finding a speaker. Um, we follow that with a catered luncheon that starts at noon. The caterer usually delivers the food between 11:15 and 11:30 so that it doesn't interrupt our good news talk. And one of the volunteers brings a birthday cake. Before the meal, I announce the birthdays of everyone in our group that month and even those who are not in attendance, and we sing happy birthday. I announce the caterer and the meal that's being provided. I then offer a quick prayer for the food and pick a table to go first. Then I just refill people's drinks and make sure everybody has what they need and get settled. I usually just pick two of the reliable people that I know to help serve the food, and everyone's always really willing to help. Around 12:40, our pastor shares church updates. We have a time of prayer request sharing, and we finish with communion. We have a core of 18 to 22 guests that attend monthly. Both our lead pastor and associate pastor also attend, and it's a great time for the group to get to catch up with them and touch base with them about how they're doing. Um, Here is a summary slide of the tasks involved in coordinating a monthly luncheon. There is a resource included at the end of the presentation with a more detailed list for your use, and I'll have Jan include my contact information if you'd like to contact me and ask any questions. The Good News Crew has been a blessing to our congregation in many ways. It provides an opportunity for the older adult members to arrive at church at a more relaxed time, get the best parking we can provide, and have time to sit and visit. I have received feedback that this is the best meal I get all week. And someone said, "This is my church." People that don't feel comfortable or are able to get to a regular Sunday church service or have been worshiping online have the opportunity to gather and get the in-person love, hugs, updates, and prayers that they would be missing by not going to a regular church service. It's also a time of encouragement about the things the church is doing and that the older adults' legacy of service continues to grow and thrive. We have used this time to host important community conversations, such as gathering feedback during our discernment when we were hiring an associate minister. It also gives our senior members a time to make their voices heard in times of discernment for the congregation. Sometimes guests invite their kids or friends that drive them to appointments, and that gives them an opportunity to invite others to share in our community and share that love and joy of our group. Um, I truly believe that the Good News Crew, or whatever you decide to call it, is a model that can work for older adult ministry. So thank you for your attention. I'll now turn it over to Pastor Lois so she can share about her ministry.
Thank you, Abby. That sounds like a very fun and engaging ministry. I
Thank
love
you. Thank you, Lois.
it. Um, I'm Pastor Lois Kelly. I'm an ordained minister through the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Um, 9 years ago, I was called as the senior pastor for Blue Valley Christian Church. They had sold their building about a year before calling me. And there was still a small core group that wanted to be church and wanted to try to see what does that look like? What do we do now? They sold their building realizing, that it was just too big. They had a loan on it. They didn't need all that space. So they made the hard and right decision to let go of that building. And so we spent a year looking at where we might land, what kind of ministry, and we ended up in a retirement community. We are at Silvercrest at Deer Creek, which is in Overland Park, Kansas, and we landed there mainly because one of our members, his mother, was a resident there. So he talked to the director there, the staff, and they said, "Oh, they would love to have us come and be a part of that community, have church there." So that's kind of how we landed there. We realized that older adults, they face a lot of losses in their life, and especially then once they move into independent or assisted living facility. They might have moved out of state to come be closer to family, so they lose their community, they lose their neighbors. um, just all kinds of losses, and usually the loss of their church, especially moving out of state. But even within, it may be that it's not as easy to get there anymore. Lots of reasons why they no longer have that as well. And so we want to help fill that gap. So in the fall of 2019, we also applied for a grant through the MBA and received it. This allowed us to hire a ministry intern. We looked at the seminaries for students to help get the word out about a different kind of church and what it would look like. And this is actually our intern, Rhonda, there. During the pandemic, we did a kind of outdoor worship one Sunday, had our signs and our balloons, and we went to the windows of those in assisted living just to be able to wave and let them know that they weren't forgotten, that we were still there and we still remembered them. We did a lot through the pandemic to help them know that we still cared about them and that they were still on our minds.
but it was nice to have that and have that grant. We've also just recently applied for another grant. Now our hope is an intern in marketing and social media. Again, just to help us get the word out about this kind of ministry. There is a need. I've had uh, retirement communities contact me. Do you know of another church like you all that would come in our community? I've had churches say, "How do we do this?" So the need is out there. Um, and it's great for that. So, uh, what we do to fill that gap, we want to be their church. We don't want to just be a group that comes in on Sunday morning, does worship, and then we're gone until the next Sunday. Church, as you know, is more than that. It is everything else. It's the time of fellowship. It's the time of gathering. It's the events, the special activities, the outreach. Really, a lot of the stuff that Abby has said that they do in the Good News Crew. I mean, that's what church is. It's building those relationships. And so that's what we wanted to be. We wanted to be there throughout and fill that gap. And so, our next slide shows us in one of the rooms. This is the community room. This is also a room where we do have worship, but it's what they do for a lot of their activities. It's what we do for our outreach. And this is our room. I just kind of want to tell you too about building the relationships. That's what's important. You got to build trust and relationship, and it takes time. When we first went there, um, we would have a handful maybe of residents that would come because they're a little bit of skeptical. They're not sure who we are, what's going on, and are you going to be another loss? Because I don't want another loss. And so it takes time to build that. And as you can see, um, we have built that now in the amount of residents that are coming. Um, we try to do outreach that is accessible and easy for them to do because they want to still be useful, have that purpose. One of the things that we do is we put together the like hygiene kits and cleaning kits. We did one for these cleaning kits for KC for refugees. And what's nice is we collect all the items we need ahead of time. Some residents go out and buy the items. Others give us a donation and let us do the shopping for them. And we gather all the supplies. And then, as you can see, they're able to stay seated. And we just do assembly line. We take the bag and we pass it down, and each person puts their item in that bag until we fill them. And then we always have time afterwards with cookies and stuff to have some time to talk. But a lot of conversation happens while we're doing it. We talk about the ministry and the need and where these kids will go. So it really opens up a lot of that. Another one that we enjoy doing is the KC Pet Project, where we make the beanbag heating pads for them, and you can see that in this slide. Again, it's another thing where they can stay seated and do it. We have people that kind of go help, and we see one of our members there, Andrew. He's a runner, so after they fill the bag, he takes it over to one of the ones operating the sewing machine that will close it up. Um, Many residents have had pets or currently have pets, and so this is a very meaningful one because they love their pets and they know that this is going to help those animals. And so this is one that they request that we do more often. They really enjoy this outreach. So this is what's nice, is finding what is their passion, what is their meaningful outreach, how can they still serve that. So we do that. Then our services and some of the things that we do, the different special worships, we try to be very ecumenical. Even in our Sunday morning, I have people from all different denominations come. So we are very ecumenical. This one was a foot washing service that we held during Holy Week. What I really loved about this is we did it in the assisted living side. This is in their living room area. So very comfortable, calming, non-traditional type setting for this service. Um, but what made it easy was the accessibility. So there's some in their wheelchairs, there's some there on couches, as you see. And this woman washing the feet, she is an assisted living resident, but she is also a retired United Methodist pastor. And she's the one that she said, let's do a foot washing, and I'll help you. Let's do it. And on the independent living side, there is a retired Catholic priest. And he goes, "Yeah, I would love that. Let's do it." So the three of us were working together to plan this service. and share in the washing of the feet. So that way we kind of had people in clusters. So those that were washing it, that had a little bit of trouble getting up and down could kind of do a cluster group right where they were. So that was helpful. But it was a very meaningful service, not only for those that attended, but for those of us that led that worship, and to have those residents involved in that was very meaningful. Um, there's a lot that goes into this. I talk about the relationships that we need to build. And you see that this is one of my favorite pictures. One of my members took this in worship, and this is what it's about. It's the trust and the relationship building. And these two ladies here, they both have dementia, and but it's a caring for each other. And the one, they're kind of in that pink turtleneck sweater, she just really felt, and her job was to take care of the other one. And she would, the other one would reach out her hands, she would grab it, she would hold it throughout the whole service. That's what Betty wanted her to do. And it was just so sweet. But there's the trust that they have, that they're there for each other, that they're caring for each other. And so I think it's a very symbolic of what it means to do this ministry in a retirement community, because you do have to be committed to it and important. In order to build those relationships and build that trust, you need to be there throughout the week, doing things with them. One of our members used to say at the beginning of our ministry, goes, I feel like those that attend worship are like our board, and all the other residents are our church. And that's really how it was, because we have many residents that don't come to worship, but they appreciate that we're there. They know that we're there for them. If they need anything, they can come to us. They're there for the other activities and outreach we do. So there's already that relationship there as well. So I did write a book, as I tried to figure out, how do I share this ministry with people. And so I think we have a slide of the book on there. Yes, it's called Ditch the Building, Invest in People. What I like is that front cover that was designed by one of the residents there. So that was the collaboration. So I was thankful for that. But that book, it's available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle, but it gives you a little bit more detailed of everything we do for our ministry. We ended up, because of the pandemic, we were just ready to take off and share about our ministry and have others come walk alongside and help us. We had to rebuild after that. So we merged with Hillcrest Christian Church. They help us out with some of our administrative stuff, and so that this ministry can continue. So there's a lot of ways of partnering with other churches that can also help you. And so I thank you for listening to me. I'm going to pass this on to Jan.
Thank you so much, Lois and Abby. I am so inspired by their ministry and their work, and I hope you've been too. I do want to remind you, though, that they are well-established programs, but they've also shared with you the steps from the beginning, so it's doable and it can be done. I want to encourage you to take hope in that. Stepping back for a moment, I want to just add a couple things to what they've shared, but shortly we'll be inviting you to talk with us about some models you have ideas for or are actually doing, or some questions and ideas or things that we might address or go a little bit deeper with you on in the few minutes that we'll have remaining. But just ahead of doing that, it sounds to me like both Lois and Abby are well on their way to addressing the loneliness factor and building relationships, and how important it is for people to feel they are valued and needed. And all of this can happen one person at a time, as we've said before. And so these reminders will help you in thinking about, what do you feel called, or what does your church feel called to address? It can begin with something very small. There's a wonderful image that comes from nature that I think is an encouraging image for us to think about. And that is, in a forest, when there has been storm damage, as we know there is in North Carolina now, or when there has been fire, there are ways that the forest seeks to heal and recover. And I think the metaphor is a beautiful one for us. What the forest does is gather as many species and resources as it can, literally all kinds, many kinds of seeds, many types of plants, and begins with small circles of regrowing. The networks of these small circles multiply. They get bigger, but they also come closer to each other. And so, beginning with one small circle on the forest floor, eventually there are many healing circles. And eventually, after that, those healing circles connect with each other. And that is how the forest is rebuilt and regrown, shall we say. And I love that image for us to consider how we can start with small circles and grow and multiply in that way. So there are many models that we'd like to just mention for you, and know that there are other ways that we can help resource you in terms of what those models might do. You've heard about two specifically. There are others that have to do with inviting people to participate in your worship, having older adults and maybe young children help in some leadership role in worship, for instance, lighting the candles on the altar before worship starts, sharing in the bulletins, having a young person read aloud to a person who might not be able to visually see as well. Within worship, there are many ways we can think of including older adults and every generation. Outside of worship, there are some other ways that I've heard of, and I know that you have heard too. Some of those are having the coffee hour after worship with the birthday cake once a month, as Abby has shared, with the birthday cake and the people having a birthday that month. But one church that I know of invited those who have the birthday that month decorate that cake, and they decorate it together. So whether it's the 5-year-old and the 80-year-old decorating together, they learn to know each other. Then they have a little conversation while they're doing it, and they find out, when is your birthday? When is your birthday? And this has started a wonderful intergenerational reaction and interaction within that congregation. Another congregation has made a huge commitment to creating a team of helpers to assist those who need living support, assist with shopping, transportation, and meds, and so on and so on. And by the way, another aspect that was highly mentioned in large numbers in our surveys was the need for transportation, all kinds of transportation to various places, including church. The other is the need for caregiving, respite, or support. We have models for this within support groups, but also models for offering respite in a volunteer way that is not costly. So there are other ideas and models that we are ready to share with you. But right now, I would like to open up the conversation to you. And Abby and Lois can jump in as well as they choose. But just remember, if you wish to speak, you don't need to be recognized because we can't see all of you on one screen anyway. But just remember to unmute and name who you are, and then begin so that we can make sure we do hear you. So we'll take a moment now just to wait and to listen, and please feel free to share and ask questions with us.
Hi, good morning. My name is Brianna. I am a community chaplain here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I am starting a ministry working with nursing homes in the area, in the community nearby the church. And this is really new to me, so I was wondering on what would be a good idea on activities to start with the nursing homes. So I haven't contacted them yet. So I'm working on the plan on what activities to propose to the nursing homes. So any suggestions? I mean,
Thank
I'm getting I'm taking notes and writing, and I just sent a message to Abby like, can you tell me more about your ministry? Because I'm like trying to get as much information as I can because I'm like new at this. So
Thank you, Brianna. I'm going to ask Lois if she might respond, being in a care facility with her congregation.
Yeah. I would say one of the first things is I would contact their activities director and let her know that you would like to help with that. Sometimes there's some that they have that you can kind of get into to sort of get to know the people, but also just whatever volunteers you have, whatever they're passionate about. If there's a certain game they like, if they like to do art, if they like to do music, whatever it is that they like to do, then they would go in. Activity directors would love it when somebody comes and says, "Hey, I've got this activity, art or music or whatever, can we present this or do this with you?" And they would love to include that. But that would be a good person to talk to first and kind of brainstorm some ideas with.
yeah, and I have a group of teenagers and a group of kids that are willing to come in and just spend time with them. So
So I would suggest to you, and it'll be in our resources, there's these things called talking points.
uh-huh.
They're cards. I have the generation one and the Christian one, but they're cards that you ask a question and the person answer it. But it's a good way to kind of get to know each other and to build those
Okay.
relationships. One says, "What kind of books did you like to read?" So
Okay.
that's a good intergenerational activity to do.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lois. Who else?
Hello.
Hey,
Hi.
Connie.
Hi. My name is, yeah, you see my name. Let me put the video so you can see me. Okay, so I'm working with a neighborhood, and we do have some seniors, and my concern is transportation. You mentioned transportation, and that is one of the concerns here, um, various reasons for transportation. So maybe you could share some of what you do or some of the things that perhaps we could emulate. We're in Michigan, by the way. I'm a community um, health worker, and so that's my role. So we're working to help our community with various health issues. And then it's just everything, whatever they need to make them safe. We want to be able to provide some resource. So transportation struck out. I'm like, yes, and I like the fact that you do have programs to eliminate or minimize isolation, which we know is an issue with some of our seniors. So,
Mhm. Thank you for that question. And I'll jump in on this one, but Abby and Lois, feel free as well. I work with groups of churches in Wisconsin and Michigan, and part of our conversation of late has been about transportation. So, a couple of caveats for people. Many times, churches do recognize, church groups do recognize, or other groups as well, that transportation is needed. But what often stops them is personal insurance, auto insurance, and people who have concerns over safety and liability when driving another person. So I think that one of the very first things to begin to do is to talk with the group that you are working with, or with some key people in that group, and listen to what ways they might like to address the transportation need. And you're going to hear the theme of ask and listen as the beginning of a starting point for anything to what people need. But I'm assuming, Connie, that you've already heard some of that from people. I do know of churches who provide regular drivers who are volunteers, who are willing to not get hung up on the liability question for their own car insurance. They may be people who are drivers of school buses or other kinds of things that feel a little bit more comfortable that way. There are other churches who provide a stipend to all older adults without naming them. And that is very key because older adults do not like to ask, especially for transportation, it seems. And they are not often willing to say if they do need it and are not anxious to ask when they need it. So, with this church's anonymity, they offer the stipend for taxi service because they're in an area where there is taxi services. In rural areas, that is not the case. There is no ease in finding ways to provide a stipend for someone to drive. But now there's Uber and there's Lyft and other ways of doing that. So we're hearing more churches liking the idea of finding ways to do the transportation anonymously. People then make a contact, have the support of the church in paying for the cost of making that transportation happen. And I hope that helps a little bit, Connie.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome. Who else? What other questions, thoughts? Oh, yes, I see. Go
If I
ahead.
could, hi, I'm Steve Mason, pastor at First Christian Church in Canton, Illinois. We are a small rural town of about 15,000, and our church is one of those churches that actually has a bus ministry.
Mm.
And I have been here for 3 years, and honestly, I didn't see at first the value of our bus ministry. I was one of those worried about liability and cost and maintenance, but it is a wonderful resource for us. And one of the really important things, we're one of those, we have a bus that has a wheelchair accessible lift. And but it does require, we have 3 volunteer drivers who take turns. That most of them are local bus drivers, and they have to have a CDL license. And the church pays for them to get that CDL license, and that's the biggest cost for us, that and the gas and the maintenance on the vehicle. But because we're able to do this, we regularly bring about 24 folks, picking up from about 5 different retirement communities and assisted living communities in our town. And so we're able to carry about 25 people each week to worship. We don't do much during the week, but it has been helpful. We can use it for that. We use it for church outings, like if we go to like a minor league baseball game or some sort of fun fellowship thing or a community concert. And we're even looking at being able to use it to take kids to church camp. But I have been overwhelmed, just to say, and Connie, maybe you're talking more about community needs and making sure folks get connected to the more daily resources. But it has been a real help. It was a big investment, but it's a real help for a lot of our ministries.
Thank you, Steve. And that's a great affirmation. Think about yourself. If you are not able to drive for whatever reason, how that impacts your life. It impacts life most every day for people. We'll take one more comment or question before we begin closing.
So
Yeah,
I have one more if no one else has one.
go.
You mentioned caregivers support, and that's been another issue that has come up. Some individuals are the only family member and the only caregiver for their mom or their grandmom or one of the members that are in their family, and they just get worn out. Studies show that the caregivers have a issue of surviving, just like the patient. It can be very taxing.
Mhm.
And so I just want to know what you guys do with that support. How do you access it? I have been just given a list of organizations, but I can never have too many ideas, that would help the caregiver. Um,
So thank you.
that's my question. Mhm.
So one of the ways that we offer options and ideas for that is another webinar that we held on So You Want to Start a Caregiver Group, and Kimberly Weir, who is on our call here, was one of the presenters of that. We can offer that in our resource list that we share with you tomorrow. Another is a group that I mentioned earlier, not by name, called Respite for All. I can put that in the resource list as well, which is a national faith-based group which teaches people how to establish community volunteer caregiver support in the church. That's another undertaking. Having a list of options for caregivers is really, really important. And as Connie has mentioned, it is very difficult for caregivers to get a break. And many times their life is shorter than the person they're caring for because they have become so exhausted or so debilitated and tired. So Jane, I saw your hand up before. Would you like to make a question or comment quickly before we close?
Yeah, we have the digital services also. And I guess I feel that there's a lot of the people now that are not coming to our in-person worship. And how can we assess their needs honestly? And do you have a certain format, or do you have any questions that have been helpful to get to regroup and to get the people that are lonely, whatever, maybe they aren't, maybe it's my expectation that they might be lonely, but we don't know. And that's my concern right now, is reconnecting.
I'll respond, but I want to ask Abby too, because this is part of her program and the work that she's doing. In the next minute that we have, there are ways that we are seeking to do that. And one of those is a part of the resource listing. So look for it tomorrow. It's called a toolkit for assessing ministry with older adults. There are step-by-step options in there for looking at ways to ask questions. But Abby, would you like to add to that with something that you're doing?
Well, I would say, you can make a survey, and have them fill that out for you and feed them. Just offer a meal and that always gets people in the door. I feel like if they have a good amount of notice and there's a meal, that people come, and it's just a great way to have conversations and ask people what their needs are. So.
There are people, especially older adults, who are still afraid to come out since the pandemic, and it's not just church, it's everything else. But having someone come to them or communicate with them will help them learn how to undo that. There's also a wonderful video, I will share that, it's 10 minutes long, about learning what loneliness does to a person. It's a little animated video that you would not share with a lonely person necessarily, but those who want to become more aware could. I want to thank you all so much on behalf of NBA, as well as Abby and Lois and me, for your time, for your interest, for your ministry, and the ways that you are already considering and doing work with older adults intergenerationally. So look for the resource. You will have our contact information that way tomorrow when you receive it by email. And I would like to just close with these words from our prayer earlier. When you look at your fingertip and recreate the lines and swirls and arcs of that and follow it with your finger like a labyrinth, remind yourself of the imprints that you've left on us today, that you have given others in your lifetime, and those that you hope to share and leave an imprint, because God is calling us and we are following that call. Blessings to you all, and thank you so much. And we'll stay in touch. If you like, you can stay in touch with us as well. Bye-bye.